Dr. Salem.
All right, well, thank you for letting us present just a brief summary of the work that's been done over the last 5 years on the previous strategic plan. I do, before we start, want to point out, if you look at the dates there, if you think back to what was happening in 2017, Dr. Blake was trying to buy 40,000 Eclipse glasses for the whole district. Pandemic wasn't a thing. And the reason we want to point that out is because about half of this strategic plan was done during a pandemic. So some of the most challenging times this district has faced, this was still work that continued because of your leadership and your vision. This was a really fun review. This report represents the work of the exec team. All of the directors also contributed to writing this report, but really reflects the works also in our schools, of our principals and all of the staff that make all of these systems that we put into place better. And very fitting for Dr. Joel's final meeting to be able to see all of the fruits that come out of planning and vision such as this. So just a brief overview. We won't bore you with process. You all know this process, but a lot of community involvement went into this. There was great leadership on the board from Mr. Boswell and great leadership from Dr. Neal from the LPS staff side. I think Dr. Neal was in church basements and community centers and all over the city. And Dr. Hicks and her department, when we needed bilingual liaison support, when we needed interpreters, that was the whole vision from the board, was involve as many people as possible. Don't leave anyone out. Make sure that this community has a voice. And so you'll see over 700 people participated in person. We had 3,800 people complete the online survey. And our Department of Assessment and Evaluation went through every single response and coded those responses for potential themes that they brought to that 18-person community study team. There were 5 essential questions that this board was curious about. I just gave one example, but I think it is a good representation of what you were trying to get at as a board. What does our community feel is the vision moving forward? And so eventually we got down to 5 major themes that our community felt was important and felt that we needed to do as a district to move forward. Many of you were on this website, and so just a reminder, the whole thing was a transparent process where we were posting where we were in the process. People could go in and take the survey if they wanted, or just get more information about the district. So we tried to make this really, really user-friendly to the community. So what we'll do is we'll just go through these 5 core areas. We clearly can't go over everything that's happened in the last 5 years, but we wanted to just present the major highlights. What are things that we're most proud of and feel was the best representation of that strategic plan area? So the first one is Future Ready Global Citizens. And the thing to note here is that the future is always changing, and as we think about who do we need to partner with, this is a list that I won't read to you, but all of the different endeavors and partnerships, each single bullet point on there represents hundreds of hours of planning and partnering and meetings and conversations about how to make each of these partnerships work in our district. Really proud of that TCA enrollment. That represents a huge investment on your part, and you can see just the incredible growth in that program, preparing students for careers that we might not have even known existed. An example of that is the STEM ecosystem. And Dr. Blake, Dr. Joel, we also had Brian Seck, who was a partner with Lincoln Public Schools. A lot of people came together, and we really are a leader nationally in how all of the different community organizations partner so that we can have students out in the community doing job shadow experiences and getting their hands dirty in some of these STEM careers available. Supporting academic success for all students, the thing that was most important to this committee was that graduation alone is not the goal. Graduation rate is very important, absolutely critical, but what the community was telling us is there's a lot that we want to make sure they graduate with. We don't just want them to walk across the stage. We want that to actually represent something. And what should that diploma represent? So you can see the academic progress our students have made, increase in the number of early childhood classrooms. Again, just adding one early childhood classroom is hundreds of hours of planning, finding locations, finding teachers, enrolling families. So every piece, every bullet point on here represents a ton of work. I also want to point out, like I said, I won't read everything, a significant increase in mental health supports, and that represents the work of Mr. Ewing, Dr. Fundus, and of this board to say that this is something that's a priority area for you as we support students, not just in their academics, but in the whole child as well. And those are pretty significant numbers. One thing that also came out of the strategic plan in this area was the LPS Graduation Pathways Program. One thing to point out here, as we've said before, we don't give up on students. We continue to find ways for them to be successful. This is something that the new All Means All action plan recommended be expanded because it has been so successful. So we actually talked about this just a few weeks ago when we were going through that action plan. Support for educators, our HR department took the lead on this, and this was really a holistic look of all the way from recruiting to hiring to supporting and retaining educators. So you can see some of the things that have been put in place over the past 5 years, including hiring additional teachers from diverse racial and ethnic backgrounds. It is important to note as well that the HR department started monthly cohort meetings with our classified, certified, and administrators of color. That was really an action plan put in place to build community, to make sure we're retaining staff of diverse backgrounds and making sure they feel like this is home for them and a place that they want to be for their career. We also hired a continuous improvement coordinator, and that was a new role dedicated just for the sole purpose of supporting new teachers. It also includes instructional coaching. It also includes the tenure program, all of the things we do to wrap around a new teacher and make sure they don't get lost in what is a fairly large district. So an example here took a lot of collaboration and teamwork from everyone in this room. We created new educator checklists. This is something that every single month we know that new educators are getting this information. I'm going to point out some examples. So you see there it says new educators. Well, all educators get $225 in their October paycheck for school supplies. That may be something that no one actually talks to them about. They don't know what that is showing up in their paycheck. You'll also see on the March checklist, it says, make sure you do your letter of intent. HR is really happy that that's on there. These are all of those little things that if you're a new teacher in a district of thousands, how do we make sure that we're not losing anybody because they don't feel like anyone is helping them with all of these little pieces that are really critical that they know. Family and community partnerships. Again, work from Dr. Neal, from Nola Derby Bennett, and their staff with CLCs and community partnerships. Again, you can see every single one of these things takes lots of time and attention. Just the addition of one CLC site, again, takes lots of time and partnership and effort. We've added 3 additional CLC sites and also hired 2 full-time curriculum specialists within the CLC system. One example to point out is the interlocal agreement, helping, and you can see the Journal Star article here, really helping make that a permanent connection and permanent partnership. Not just Lincoln being responsible, but it's really a full community within our public schools that help make this possible. And then the last one, which really needs no explanation because we've all lived this over the last few years, but it came out loud and clear from our community during the strategic plan that they wanted to make sure our facilities are future ready. And what does that mean? And so Lincoln Public Schools, you can see from 2018 just until last year, all of the things that go into that is pretty intense. And so this wasn't a bond issue presented to the community. This really was years and years of research, community building, committee structures to make sure that that was a bond issue that our community was receptive of and supportive of. I also want to mention, again, this wasn't done behind closed doors. This whole process was very transparent, and so we invited the community in on multiple occasions to weigh in, give input, look at the plans for what these facilities may bring to the community, and ultimately that's why we feel like the bond was a success in our community. So 5 years of work. Are there questions I can answer? I should also mention for any of the public, there's a full report available that'll be on our website that goes through every single one of those 5 areas, all of the different strategic action steps that were in place, and gives a summary of what was done in each of those areas. So we pulled out just a few bullet points, but there's so much more in that report that the community can go on and look at what was done.
Questions or comments? Is that the, Barb?
Wow. Thank you. We could spend all night on questions and talking about all this, but just thank you to everybody for doing this.
Dr. Joel?
I just want to thank Dr. Salem. I'd like to tell you she volunteered to give the report today, but I think I appointed her to do it, and just to be expeditious, but great job of capturing that. And we just wanted you to know that as you think about the transition that's occurring in the next 5-year plan, that's really how we move the district forward. And it's great to look back on 5 years in 10 minutes and see that it really was a great body of work. So thank you, Dr. Salem. Thank you to everybody that participated in that process.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Dr. Joel. It was interesting going back through and remembering all the conversations, all the time we put in, the things that bubbled up to the top as priorities then. Some things are still going to be those same priorities. Other things are not. We live in a different world now. But so much work has been done, and the import and the value of this strategic plan, and recognizing this is a good reminder that we're going to be talking about our next strategic plan that will be guiding our important decisions for the next several years. So that'll be coming soon. I would echo Dr. Joel's comments, Dr. Salem, and to your staff. Thank you so much for your work on this.
Yay.
Thank you. All right, next that brings us